So in this video, we're just going to do a little intro into styling ventilated facial hair pieces. So I don't unfortunately own a Marcel iron and Marcel oven, so I can't really show you any of that. I am going to do a separate demo video where I'm going to talk about styling facial hair without any heat. So I'm just going to kind of like talk through a little bit of this, but unfortunately I can't physically show you a lot of it. If you're one of my students and you're watching in your PowerPoint that I made, there is a link to a video demo of how to use a Marcel iron and Marcel oven, so you will at least have that. There's plenty of things out there if you do want to learn, because plenty of people use it to style regular hair too. It's just something that I personally have not invested in yet. So your very first thing, just like if you are styling a wig, is that you want to know if it's human hair, yak hair, synthetic hair, whatever your hair is made of. You have to know what it is, because if you are using a synthetic hair to ventilate your facial hair with and you go to style it with heat, it's just going to melt, and you could even like burn your lace if things are too hot too. So you just want to make sure that you are not putting heat on something that you are not supposed to put heat on. So I think sometimes we don't think about it when it's not like an actual like wig or something, but it's going to follow the same rules. So human hair, yak hair, you can tolerate heat, it's fine. But synthetic hair, I don't like to ventilate it with it. I don't like to make facial hair with it. I do it a lot though, because it's just what I have on hand. You just can't put heat on that, so you have to be really careful. The very first thing that you're going to do when you are styling facial hair, so you want to leave it pinned down to your block. If you take your piece off of the block, that's fine, that's cool, that's great, but you need to pin it back on. When you are done ventilating it, you need to make sure that it stays pinned on. If you take it off, pin it back on, because it needs to be securely on there when you are styling it. Because if you're just trying to like style it loose, you're never going to be able to like get your cut precise or your curls precise, just because it's going to be sliding all over the place. So make sure it stays pinned down. Your initial haircut, when you do this, so a lot of times when you're ventilating, the hair is going to be, especially for like a mustache or something, the hair is going to be like way longer than what you would actually want it to be. So if that's the case, you just want to go in and just do like an initial haircut on it. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to be something that's going to get some of that extra length off, so that when you're styling, it's not in your way. But you do want to make sure that you are leaving yourself more hair than what you think you need, because often I think that our brains don't realize like once you curl it, it's going to get like a little bit shorter. It's just not something that I think that we always think of. So leave it a little bit longer than you think, just because it's a lot easier to go back and trim it than it is to make a completely different piece because you messed it up and cut it too short, right? And then another thing you can do is you can even kind of like layer it a little bit. So if you just do like that first cut, it's just like a super like blunt cut like this, that's just gonna like take the length off. But if you kind of like hold it out a little bit, you can kind of go at it in almost like, not necessarily like a different angle, but like kind of, and that's gonna help give you a little bit of like a layer to it. Because if you think about it, I think it's harder to see like in a mustache because it's so flat usually, but in like beards and goatees, everything has layers. It's not just gonna go like one piece of hair straight down, it's gonna be layers of hair building it, so you want that same effect in what your ventilated piece is. So you're gonna have some parts that are shorter than others, so it's also good to kind of like think about that and figure out how you can incorporate that. Depending on the style that you want, there's like a couple different ways that you might be styling your facial hair too. There's going to be some pieces that you might not have to do anything to. So depending on the texture of the hair that you use to ventilate it and like how short the piece is. So think like eyebrows, or like sometimes even like mustaches. And if it's like really, really short sideburns, maybe sideburns, but it's probably mostly like eyebrows and mustaches, maybe like a really flat soul patch or something. You might not have to do any kind of curling too. It might just need like a little bit of like hairspray and gel, or like a little mustache wax to kind of get it to like lay flat, but stuff like that might just need a haircut, so that's one option. You can use pin curls. Like I've seen people like styling really like long beards with like pin curls actually. So that's one way you could do it. You could do like tiny rollers. Like if you have like probably smaller than this, I think this perm rod is probably a little bit too big. But if you have like little straws or tiny rollers, tiny perm rods, you can use that. And that's a really good option if you do have like synthetic facial hair, because you could go in and steam it, and that's gonna make the hair curl up the same way that it would if you were using the steam and rollers on a synthetic wig. So it's not necessarily that you're always looking for your facial hair to get curly, because we're not everyone's gonna have like crazy voluminous curly beards and things, and not everyone's gonna have like handlebar mustaches, but it's a good idea to put like a little bit of body in it, just like I mentioned in the roller set video, just because rarely is anything going to be laying just totally flat if you want it to look realistic. Real hair has texture, right? Whether it's like hair in your head, but especially like facial hair. Eyebrows, I think it's harder to like see that, but if you look at somebody's facial hair, it's not usually like super smooth and straight. It needs to have some kind of like texture to it. So putting in little curls, little like rollers into it, whatever it is that you're doing, that's just going to help it look a little bit more realistic. So that's one option. You can do that in human hair and yak hair ones too. Again, you want to make sure it's wet if you're going to do a roller set on it. If it's synthetic, you got to steam it and then let it dry completely before you take your rollers out. Another thing that I really like to do, and this is what I'm going to do a demo of, I learned this when I was interning at Cirque du Soleil, and I thought that this was just like the most genius thing in the world. I was surprised I hadn't learned it yet, but it's to just use like gel and hairspray and straight pins, and you can use that to kind of like pin your mustaches and whatever your facial hair is into the shape that you need. So especially for handlebar mustaches, it is a lifesaver because yes, you can sit there and you can like curl them with your Marcel iron, but trying to get it to stay is so hard. So like what I try to do is I try to do it like the night before I need it, or at least like a couple hours before, so it has time to dry. You put a bunch of gel in it, hairspray it down, use mustache wax if you need to, and you can just pin it into the shape that you want. So I use that for so much facial hair now, whether it's like fantasy stuff like I'm doing at Cirque, character stuff, realistic things. It is so helpful, and that is what my video demo is going to be of, especially for synthetic hair, because if it's not synthetic, like, or if it is synthetic, you can't sit there and like curl it into the shape that you want. So it can be really hard, especially because like trying to get a roller on this little part, that's not necessarily going to work. So if it is synthetic, I really feel like that's one of the best ways you can do it. You just have to be careful that you're not using hairspray or any kind of hairstyling product that has a ton of scent to it. If you can get unscented, that's always better, just because that is going to be right under somebody's nose. And I've had people complain in the past when things were like too floral or too scented. So always keep that in mind if you are going to go with that method. Otherwise, what you are probably going to be using, if you're working probably in like a larger wig shop, I would say like not smaller theaters are probably going to have this, but in like the larger scale wig shops, you might have a Marcel iron and Marcel oven. So these are great for like human hair, yak hair, not for synthetic hair, because it's basically like it's like a different form of like a curling iron. So a lot of people actually do use them still to style actual hair with. I've only ever styled like facial hair pieces. I think I would be terrified to like come at somebody's head with one of these. But basically, and I wish I had one to show, but I don't. There is like a little electrical oven that you plug in. Not all of them have like temperature readings on them. If you can find one that you can like set to a certain temperature and that actually like has a thermostat on it and like tells you what it is, and it has like a temperature control dial, that's awesome, because otherwise you have, I mean, you are still testing it every time you take it out, but you never really know like how hot it is. So if you can afford one or find one that's like that, that's always going to be better. But basically it's like these little ovens that you plug in, you let it heat up, and then you're going to have all of these metal curling irons. So Marcel irons are different from like the traditional curling irons is in like the way that you control them mostly, and kind of like the way that they heat up. So like in a traditional curling iron, it's like when you plug it in, they like internally heat up, but when you put the Marcel irons in the Marcel oven, kind of the whole thing gets really, really hot. So the handles are like coated so that it doesn't get super hot, but outside, inside of barrels, they're very, very hot. The whole thing can be hot. Traditional like commercial curling irons are a little bit safer to use, I would say, just because the temperature control is right there, and I would say that Marcel ovens have a potential to probably get way hotter than any commercial curling iron that you would probably get, I would imagine. I could be wrong because I don't do hair a ton, but they're pretty scary, but I think they're pretty fun though too. I did a lot of like facial hairstyling when I was in school and like on internships, because at school it just kind of started because like nobody else ever wanted to do it, so I just kind of like fell into doing it, and personally I prefer it to styling hair. I would much rather be working on facial hair than be working on hair or wigs most of the time, honestly. So if you ever get a chance to like actually learn how to use a Marcel iron, they're really cool. They're a little bit tricky because you do have to like hold the iron in a specific way, but what's really nice about these when it comes to styling facial hair is that they come in way smaller sizes than most commercial curling irons are. So you can find like some pretty small barreled curling irons, but you really, I feel like, cannot find anything, or at least anything that's not like hundreds of dollars, that is going to be as small as like these Marcel irons are. So having these for facial hair, if you're doing tons of facial hair, is amazing. Is it something you're probably going to own personally? Not unless you're constantly doing stuff like this. I think it is more of like a shop kind of a thing. But they are super fun. They are great. The most important thing to remember though when you're using it is that it is really hot, right? So you have to be really, really safe. you need to test the irons every single time you take it out. So just because you tested it the first time that you took it out and it was fine does not mean that when you put it back in that it's okay the next time you take it out. I think sometimes people feel like they test it once and it's fine. You have to test it every single time because it can get so hot, it can just completely scorch the hair, and like destroy everything. You can burn your lace with it. If you burn your lace, you have to completely start over because what can you do if you burn a giant hole in your lace, right? So please be super careful if you ever use them. If you are using them to test it, basically like the way the Marcel irons work, and like I'm holding my hand as if I have one, so this isn't gonna make sense. But it has like a little clamp, so like you're kind of holding it, you have the little clamp, and you would just like clamp down on the hair to test it. So it's a good idea to have like a sample of whatever the hair is to test while you are styling. If you don't have that, then you can use like a single ply of tissue. Like you would literally like pull the tissue apart and use one piece of it. We used to use end papers at school. You can use those. The only thing you have to be careful of if you're using like tissue or end paper is if it's too hot, you could technically like catch it on fire. So that's probably not the best thing in the world, but that's definitely one way to know that it's way too hot, right? So what you're looking for when you do take it out and you clamp it down on either like your hair or your tissue or your end paper, if it just like bends the hair or just like puts like a bend mark kind of like on the paper without it like changing color or getting crispy or lighting on fire, then you know that it's ready to use. So you can usually get like, I feel like you can get like a couple curls out of it, but you'll kind of know as you're styling if it stops curling, then you know that you got to put it back in. So it's not something that's gonna like stay hot for an hour. Like you're gonna have to frequently put it back into the oven. So it can seem like a little bit tedious, but like I said, I think it's fun, like once you get the hang of it, and it is really effective for curling facial hair because you're just really not going to find any other kind of iron that you can get that wide of a variety of sizes in, that you're going to be able to make like those tiny little like curls that you need for like facial hair and getting texture in facial hair. So again, when you're testing it, if you're testing like the hair or the paper and it turns like yellow or like white or black and it's like crispy or it starts smelling like it's burning or something like that, it's not, you cannot use this. You need to cool it off. So do not put it back in the oven if it is that hot. You don't want to just randomly put it down on something because it could burn it, right? So it's best if you just kind of like hang out with it. You can kind of like wave it to cool it off, but if someone is near you, do not burn them. Do not burn yourself. So I think it's better to just kind of like hang out for a second, test it again, then see where you're at, because all you're looking for is for it to make sort of like a slight bend, and that's how you know it's ready. If you press it on the hair or you press it on the paper and it does nothing, it's not hot enough. So it can seem like a little bit frustrating, and again, like I think it can seem kind of tedious because you have to test it so much, but really anytime you're putting heat on something, you should really test it. Like even if it's like a commercial curling iron, it's just a good idea to always kind of like know what you're working with, because once you like burn something, you can't really go back from there. So I just think it's better to be safe than sorry in these situations. If you're putting mustache wax or like a lot of hair products, sometimes that will like smoke. That is not anything you have to be worried about. It's just like the product kind of like burning away. So that is something that could happen. Basically though, with Marcel irons, and again, I don't have one to show you, so I think looking at a video of it is probably best. Because me explaining it probably doesn't make sense, but you do have to hold it in a pretty specific way. So when you're holding it, so basically it's like a little clamp, and then there's like two little like handles for you to hold on to. It's like there are curling irons that they make that you can buy commercially that are like similar to this, but at least like in the controls, but they don't have like the oven or anything. But if you can't find any like Marcel iron videos, there might be ones of just like the curling irons, and that kind of gives you an idea. But again, if you're one of my students, it's in your PowerPoint, so it is out there on YouTube for anybody else watching. I did find it. But basically when you're holding it, you're gonna hold it so that your thumb and your forefinger are on one side of the handle, while your third and your fourth fingers are controlling the other side. So me saying that literally doesn't make sense, right? But basically when you're doing it, you're just using like your third and your fourth fingers to like open and close it. So the other ones are just kind of like stabilizing it, and then you just kind of use the other ones to like open and close it. And it's sort of like rolling motions when you do it too. I don't know, you kind of are like almost feel like you're like rolling it back and forth in your hand. I don't know if that makes any sense, but again, it's one of those things that like unless you're physically seeing it, it's like really hard to explain, so I apologize for that I don't have one to show. But you're gonna work it that way, and again, don't just like try to do it the very first time with a super hot iron, I would like practice with it without it heating up, and just like rolling it back and forth in your hand, because it is kind of like a muscle memory thing. It's something that you have to get used to. But once you get used to it, like I don't even think, like when I was going back through and like reading the directions, I'm like, I don't even think I like think about it anymore when I do it. You just kind of like figure it out. So it's one of those things that like practice it with a cool iron that's not hot, practice it without anything plugged in, any heat, just so you get the idea of it, and then when you feel like you're ready, that's when you can plug it in, and start using it with heat. And just, I would still test it on something that's like not your actual piece first, just in case it gets messed up. But it's a good idea to kind of practice it, get comfortable with it, and then start doing it for real. Usually you can go through and just kind of like curl it all once, and then kind of like comb it out. Like I said, there's tiny little mustache combs, or like your rat tail combs could be good for this. See how that is. If that's the kind of texture that you want, you might be done. You might just have to go in and kind of like finesse the ends a little bit. But it's good to kind of give it like one run through with the little curling Marcel irons, just so that you can get that initial texture in it, and then you can kind of like brush it out just like you would a wig if it's like too much. And then you might also, at this point, you would maybe need to like trim it a little bit more. So if you're like, oh, it's still a little bit too long, even with the curls, you can go in and trim it. Again, they make tiny mustache scissors, tiny hair scissors, tiny sewing scissors. If it's like synthetic hair and stuff, it doesn't really matter, as long as those are like your designated hair scissors, right? So don't use your actual sewing scissors on this stuff. Make sure that they're just for hair, if you are going to get scissors that small, to be very clear. And then, again, finish it off, curl it like you want to, and then whenever you are done working with it, it's very important, unplug it. Do not forget to unplug it. Like, I don't care if you like turned it off, if it has like on-off switch, because I feel like I've worked with ones that just like plug in and heat and that's all it is. Unplug it, just because I hate when I like walk into a shop or something and like everything is still plugged in and like it's off, but I just like, I don't know, I just think it's always better to just completely unplug things, because if somebody like knocks into something and accidentally turns it on, or like one time you don't remember to turn it off or something and it's just sitting there heating up. Same goes with like curling iron, steamers, everything. Just unplug it. Like when you are done with something, unplug it. Obviously it needs to cool off before you can put it away. And usually you'll come, like when you get these things, like they'll either have like a big stand around it where you can like put the irons in it to store it like that, or you'll have like kind of like a heat resistant little, like, I think that's what we had at school, like a little roll, sort of like a brush roll, but it's for like your Marcel irons, and you can put them in there. But you need to let everything cool off first. It is not something that you can clean up quickly, so please be safe if you are ever working with these. And then just other little things. So like I mentioned, if you are trying to do like a handlebar mustache, you can do it with like mustache wax. You can do it with gel, hairspray, and some pins, and kind of finesse it how you want to. Sometimes you don't have to pin it into place if it's a short enough one. Just a little bit of like mustache wax will do it. Mustache wax is pretty readily available. The one that I have Krylons, if you can get that anywhere. It's called Zorbal paste. I'm sure that's not how you say anything in German, but you can kind of see it there. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's hilarious to say, so I frequently will pronounce it like that, even though you shouldn't, probably, because who knows what I'm actually saying. But I like to have mustache wax on hand. Having clear is probably better, just so you can use it on everything. I only have this. Sometimes I've worked with people that have their own that they prefer, so I just kind of let them bring it if it's for their natural hair. But yeah, you can use it on natural hair, facial hair. I do find, at least with this one, that you do kind of have to really work it in, though, just because you can kind of see it a little bit, even though it is clear. So basically, when you're using the wax, you kind of have to like warm it up behind your between your fingers, like you would like a nose and scar wax or something, or even like some pomades and like hair waxes. And then you're gonna like comb it through, and you kind of like twist the ends how you want. And sometimes you might have to go in, like I said, with the Marcel iron and curl it again, and that's when you might see some of the smoke, because that's just like burning off product. So that's fine, as long as it's not like literally on fire. It's fine. And then, if it really is something though that you need like a really intense, like handlebar or like curl in it or something, that's when I really do love to like set it with pins after it. So like I clean it for the night, put it back on the block, restyle it, and then shape it back with the pins. It's ready for the next morning. A light coat of hairspray. It can really help, because if you think when you clean facial hair, it's going to be taking all the product out probably, if you were cleaning it properly anyway, if you had to put spirit gum on it. If you're just doing toupee tape, then the product might hold up a little bit better, but if you are cleaning with like 99% alcohol, that's gonna probably eat through everything that's in it, especially if you like soak it or anything, so you're probably gonna have to like redo facial hair. That's really stylized like every time that somebody wears it, but it's definitely worth it, I think, to take the time to pin it into the shape that you need, because it really is a lifesaver, because trying to get that stuff to just like stay in place otherwise, I feel like it's impossible. As far as like hair gels to use with it, so me personally, depending on how hardcore of a style that I need. And a lot of times I use this for like shows when like I can't be there. I just have to like leave it for like weeks and like hope that someone else can like touch it up sometimes if they have time. I have this big tub of gel from Sally's that I would put into like a smaller container to bring to jobs and stuff with me. But using that like really helps with the facial hair, and having like, so this is like it looks like a tiny toothbrush. It's basically just like, this is actually an applicator to put on like cake mascara, I think, yeah. But having things like this, not only to clean facial hair, but something small like this can help you kind of like brush product and stuff through it. So that's really good to have on hand. Like I mentioned before in the other video, they make little like mustache styling kits with like tiny combs and tiny scissors. Those are really helpful. Those are all good things to have. And again, just make sure if you can use things that are unscented, or at least like lightly scented, that is always going to be better for people too, just so that they're not like inhaling it all the time. So again, like I mentioned, I'm going to do a little video on how to do the like pinning down and like hair gel and mustache wax and hairspray method for styling like handlebar mustaches. But hopefully this kind of gives you a good intro into how you would style facial hair. Again, I encourage you to look up videos, or if you're my student, watch the video that I put into your PowerPoint, about how to use Marcel Irons, because probably if you are working in wigs and makeup and theater, or if you plan on doing hair on people, you're going to be interacting with Marcel Irons at some point, so it's a good idea to get yourself familiar with it if you are interested in this industry at all. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this one.